Welcome to Passion Fruits, a passion project for passionate people. I'm your tomato, Daniel.
Oh, man, we're going to have the tomato as a fruit.
Adam.
Anyways.
You need to say your goddamn name.
I'm Adam, and I'm your fig.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You're not so sure about this one.
Nope, not at all, but it's okay. And today on the podcast, we have a special guest.
A very special guest.
Yes. Over the airwaves, joining us.
Yes, this is a bi-coastal episode on the East Coast.
Yes, high-tech operation.
Yes.
My name is Mark. I am a blood orange.
Whoa. He is literally...
That's all I'm going to say.
For the rest of the episode.
Yep.
I am a
anyway,
blood orange.
See you later.
Thank you, Mark, for stopping by. No, we have Mark on the episode today to talk to us about video game design. Adam and I both met Mark in college and became the bestest of friends and played video games with him nonstop. And we all dropped out of college, and now we're kind of just talking into the ether with our microphones. So
Yep.
Here we are, reconnecting. But yeah, so, I mean, let's just dive right into it and start talking about video game design.
Sure.
Mark.
Oh, and to make it clear, I'm a professional video game designer. We don't just play video games in college.
Sorry.
Do it to get paid.
This is
on
just
the reg.
This is just Mark and his bevy of YouTube comments about video games.
Yes.
That's all they are.
Why are they so lazy? You know?
So it's pretty much this podcast is going to be you trying to describe to your grandmothers what video game design is. But yes, Mark actually does get paid for video game design. So
That's true.
yeah.
And so, Mark, before we hop in too far, if you don't mind sharing who you work for and who, like, where you came from, essentially.
Whoa.
Well,
it's deep.
That's a deep question.
Yep.
Yeah. My full name is Mark Nauta. I'm a designer at Firaxis Games. They're kind of well known to be kind of like the studio that Sid Meier, built, with Civilization being one of our biggest titles in the XCom franchise. I started there in 2013, and my first project there was XCOM 2, where I was a designer and programmer. And then I worked on the DLCs and its expansion, War of the Chosen. And now I'm working on secret stuff that I can't talk about.
Oh, secret stuff. Let's dive into that secret stuff there, eh? But anyway.
Yeah. And I guess like where I came from, as far as like my start in the industry, it was my first job, which was like super lucky. Don't count on that kind of thing happening.
Right.
But I did in college with these guys. I was a computer science major, and then I went to at William & Mary, and then I went to DePaul, which is in Chicago, to get a master's in game development, which was mostly focused on programming as well.
Gotcha.
But while I was there, I did a lot of design for my projects, and we did outside of class projects with people there, because a lot of people motivated to make games in that program, obviously. And then I was really lucky that Firaxis was looking for kind of an entry-level designer programmer type, which kind of fit me really well, because Firaxis has a lot of, like, Sid's a designer programmer, Jake Solomon, who is the lead on the XCOM series,
right.
Designer programmer, and like Ed Beach, who is the current lead of the Civ series also. Like, so it's a very Firaxis thing, so it really fit my skill set really well.
Nice.
But yeah, I got the interview like on the day I was supposed to do like my final presentation for my grad school, and I was like, well, see ya, I'm flying out to... They understood, I think.
Yeah, they probably did. I mean, here you are, talking to us, so...
Yeah,
you did
really made it.
You did something right.
Yeah.
So, our first section, Mark, is Passion Fruitspedia, where generally Daniel and I will lift information from Wikipedia, but we feel like this is an excellent opportunity for you to kind of brief us on what is video game design, how does it differentiate from like programming necessarily, and just give us a rundown of what you do and maybe what your day-to-day looks like.
Sure. So, video game design is kind of it's kind of a broad topic, but I think to condense it, it's kind of the process of crafting the player's experience in a game is kind of the most broad strokes way. So that involves defining the mechanics and the rules, and what's the player doing from moment to moment. What are their goals at any given time, and also stuff like how do I want the player to feel at any given time, or themes and things that the game's trying to say. Answering questions like, why would anyone want to play this? Like, that's things you have to think about. And then as a designer, the kind of crux of your job is empathizing with people that would play your game, players, and using that kind of your built-up experience from playing games and making games to deliver on whatever you're trying to craft. Like, you're trying to make a horror game. That's you use your kind of built-up experience to be like, oh, this will scare them, and like, oh, they need a break here because we've been constantly scaring them. Not that I make horror games, because I get scared very easily. But,
me too. I couldn't even look at the title graphics for like Fear. It was like, too scary. No, thank you.
Yeah, I don't like that word. No thanks.
Not for me.
Yeah.
So talking about game design, I know that I very much appreciate that definition or explanation that you gave, but in your job, when you're talking about game design, do you also design? And I know nothing basically.
Period.
Yep. So I'm done. Bye, everybody.
Play the outro music.
You're right. Yeah, we're done. But when you say game design, are you also designing like any characters? Are you programming any of that stuff that you're talking about into the game, or are you kind of explaining how the game should go to then the programmers who are then making that work somehow in the completed game?
Yeah, so I was a programmer for a bit. I've kind of moved into more of a pure design position because I am in charge of more of the design of the thing I'm working on.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, as it should be, am I right? But so I like to think about it as like there's stages. Like, games are this really like drawn out process. Like, it takes a lot of time. Like, so there's these discrete chunks of which we call like pre-production, production, and like post-production, I guess. So pre-production is kind of like when you're figuring out kind of like all the big design questions, and that fits more into kind of like what I was talking about in the definition of like, what do we want the player to feel like when they play the game? What is the experience we want the player to have in like a very general sense? And then you try to translate that into systems or mechanics in the game. And during this stage, it's like, it's figuring out what questions we want to answer. Like, can we make, for XCOM 2 or something like that, it was like proving out a lot of stuff we had procedural maps. So it was like, can we get procedural maps to feel good, like to work and be random, but also feel like it's look good artistically and feel like they're put together real spaces, even though it's like this very algorithmic thing that's putting them all together.
Cool.
So, figuring out questions you want to answer and trying to make a prototype as cheaply and quickly as possible to know that, oh, this approach is going to work. We can apply that to kind of the rest of the project.
Gotcha.
So you do that for a lot of, parts of the game, like very basic, like I'll just use XCOM 2 a lot as an example. So we had like a system with concealment, where at the beginning of missions, you would kind of be in stealth, and then you'd have this kind of big reveal moment. So we played around a lot with that, where it was like, how much should we use this? And like, for a while, it was like, oh, you could get back into stealth if people didn't see you. And the game was kind of going in more of this stealthy kind of direction. But XCOM, like the combat with the aliens is like the most fun thing. So
right.
Avoiding them like ended up not feeling that fun. So it kind of became this more of like an ambush like mechanic instead of like a full stealth system.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things you determine, because we knew we wanted like a more aggressive slant to combat than XCOM Enemy Unknown, which was the first one.
Right.
which was very kind of reactive. Moving very slowly was kind of the best way to play that. So we wanted
Yes.
to be like, well, you can move, you're concealed, you can move pretty far, and then get the jump on enemies.
All right.
So that was kind of like the impetus of that.
We're writing these notes down so we can finally beat XCOM. So, all right. So XCOM, enemy unknown. You gotta like just go in like very slowly, but then.
Well, yeah. There's take a step, and Overwatch was like the ultimate strategy or something.
Good.
Right.
That's exactly what I do.
So,
You were like,
then,
no more Overwatch. This is not how it's being done.
yeah, that's lame.
So, Mark, I have a quick question around what you were saying earlier. So, let's say.
So you're a blood orange. We're going back to the beginning of the episode.
Like given the scope of what you're supposed to work on, so like when your boss hands you a project, what kind of constraints are you working with then? Are you is there a general timeline that you felt that you're supposed to deliver a game in? Are there how much does budget fall into this? If we were to design Daniel and Adam's Grand Adventure,
and you will at some point,
and the
course.
and the instructions were this is the title, or this is what we think the title is, and we want this to be the next Fortnite plus Halo. What kind of constraints are you working with to design that game from like start of the project to delivery?
As you can tell, we are on the cutting edge of video games. Fortnite plus Halo. So.
I mean, yeah. The Halo Reach re-release came out semi-recently, I guess.
Cutting edge.
Cutting edge. That's a good question. I think, it probably varies from studio to studio. I only know Firaxis. We have kind of, we mostly work, not all the time, but work within our IPs that we have, like Civ and XCOM. And then when you're determining what you're going to do next, like a lot of times there'll be assumptions about kind of what the studio wants to do next. But the milestones within like a game project, they kind of, the team and game scales up like with them. So you'll do an early one that we call Inception, which is like just kind of like the formal pitch to our director / publisher about here's like elevator pitch of like all these things we want to do with the game and how the broad strokes answers to those design questions, player experience type stuff. And then if that's like that sounds cool, you move into kind of a what we call first playable, where you make a prototype that proves out that some of that stuff has potential and could be fun. And the key to these like early milestones is that like if it doesn't work, you can just stop and try something else, right? With certain projects, maybe that's less likely to happen. If it's like, after Civ 5 was a big success, it was people assumed they were going to make Civ 6, which we ended up doing, right? So
right.
They went into those Inception milestones with more of the like, here's the things we want to change, not like, is this project going to happen?
Right.
Gotcha.
But then, as you move forward, so the restrictions that are on you, like, I think are what you kind of expect. If you're working with an IP, the general goal is, still appeal to fans of that IP. Like, XCOM 2 wanted to appeal to XCOM 1 fans, but also, like, try to bring in more people and do new stuff with it and, not just, rest on our laurels and do something like, which I find, working with an IP is restrictive in some ways, but it also is a good like box for creativity. Like, what can we do to change this up and still feel like XCOM, but but maybe deliver a totally different experience in other ways.
Right. Yeah. Kind of evolving and establishing your own version of the same game that people like with the same elements from a previous game, almost, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, like Sid.
Woo,
Sid
you didn't
has
say
this,
no.
No, that is completely wrong. So Sid has a lot of kind of game design nuggets of wisdom, but one of his is like the rule of thirds, where I think this like especially applies to Civ games. Like if you're iterating on something, like doing a sequel, you want to like do a third old stuff, a third like change some stuff up a little bit, and then like a third completely new stuff.
Huh. Cool.
That makes sense. So, Mark, question for you is:
Oh, gosh.
the longer you stay at Firaxis, when do you get to put your name on video game boxes?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing that people do anymore.
Aw.
You should.
I mean,
you
I
should-
keep pitching the idea, but shut
Right.
down.
You need to stop creating the pitch art with like your face as like the main part of the cover art. So like Mark Nauta's XCom. I don't know if that's gonna work. But
XCOM, a Mark Nauta experience.
Whoa.
Yeah. How's that?
Yeah. Like a Mark Nauta joint.
Exactly.
all right, so we'll send you our design pitches later.
Okay, well, I'll rev up my shredder.
Oh no!
That's what you call your filing cabinet, right?
Yes. It's got a picture of Shredder from Ninja Turtles on
Right.
it.
What if we email you our pitches and then you have to
I'll
shred
print
your
it out
laptop? Yeah. Joke's on you, Mark.
Well, darn it. Well, thank you, Mark, for giving us that explanation of game design. Now, I know that you kind of talked about how you got into it a little bit with earlier in the episode about how you got into game design and what led you to computer science as your major and stuff. But what made you want to take that path really at that point in your life? Were you set on becoming a computer science major in undergrad, or how did you get from then to now?
Yeah, I mean, I've really kind of, as long as I can remember, wanted to make video games. Like, I got a Sega Genesis when I was 5, and I was like, this is great. I love it. That's what I want to do. So I went into college, starting doing, I thought programming would be kind of like the easiest or best foot in the door kind of thing for kind of what I wanted to do. I'm not interested in doing like game art or character modeling or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of going into, I did some in high school as well. So I knew I don't think I knew that I wanted to like design video games for like since forever, but I always knew I wanted to kind of like make them because they were like my favorite kind of medium that I, interacted with.
So, I will remember, I think the first time I met you, Mark, you were like we were introducing ourselves and we were like going around stating our majors, or at least our intended majors at that time. And you're like, hey, I'm in computer science. We're like, oh, what do you want to do? And you're like, I want to make video games. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And then no offense, my exact thought was, good luck.
Wow.
I was like,
it's tough.
well, yeah, I think you were the first person I'd ever met who had that intent. And then I remember being incredibly happy for you when you got to DePaul. And it was like, holy shit. Like, this guy, like, Mark's making moves. So
Adam threw out his betting ticket from Vegas about whether or not you would make it as a game.
the over under on you was
Right.
was unfavorable in my opinion. So
No, yeah, it's it's a tough industry to get into. I think I was extremely lucky that there was an opportunity open at the time that fit what I could do, and that they picked me to do it. Like, there's so many, there's not that many jobs. It's it's an entertainment industry at its core, even though it has some very technical jobs to it. It is, it's tough. Like, I have a lot of talented friends of mine from school. It took them a while to find a job, even though they were clearly able to do, make games and are, thriving professionals right now. So yeah, it's, I definitely feel like I don't blame you for being like, yeah, right.
That's just the kind of guy Adam is.
I
He's
mean,
Yeah.
in fairness,
Super pessimist.
at that time, I was like, I want to be an astronaut. So
in college?
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, sorry.
Gosh, Daniel.
I don't get a lot of Adam's jokes, mostly because they're not funny. Whoa, yeah.
Oh.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Anyways,
I'll get my air horn. Hold on.
the follow-up question to that is, you said you got your Sega Genesis at the age of 5. What do you view as some of the most formative games in your younger years? Like, what really hooked you? And
Oh.
You don't have to say just Firaxis-based games, Mark.
No, I mean, Firaxis is, honestly a much later thing in my gaming life, mostly because they're more focused on PC, and I had a lot of consoles growing up. I play mostly PC now because I'm an adult.
Oh,
but,
damn! So we should.
I play my Switch a lot too. But, the games that like influenced me a lot. I mean, I definitely know the ones that I played. Like, I mean, you guys knew me in college. I played Super Smash Bros. Melee like all the time. That's like my favorite game of all time.
Yeah.
I remember playing Left 4 Dead 2 with you a lot in college.
Oh yeah,
that was awesome. And I remember I have a distinct memory when I think Mass Effect 2 was announced. We had lunch and you mentioned that Mass Effect 1 was like one of your favorite games ever, and I was like, oh, I tried playing that but couldn't pick it up, and then you inspired me to go back and pick it up and beat it, and it now is one of my favorite games ever because frankly it's amazing. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly do think the Mass Effect series is one of those like, seminal series in my kind of growing up where I was like, oh, like video games can do this. Like this is like a huge space opera where, interesting characters and, going to distant worlds and fighting, and there's this RPG and all the games connect. Like it was a crazy, ambitious, huge thing. So I think that's definitely like, I think I knew I wanted to get into games before that, but that's when I was like, wow, like video games are, can really do some amazing things.
Right. I think a lot of people kind of especially the entertainment industry, kind of have that realization at some point where they see some movie or some video game or some piece of music where it's like, you can do that with, a video game or that with camera work. Like, I think that's, and it's always interesting to hear what people kind of say is that turning point for them. For me, it was Adam wanting to do this podcast with me, and so that was just so inspiring that now
change your life.
We're so famous because of it.
I mean, of course.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing our fame.
Yeah.
And that's I'm sure that anybody at Firaxis would have a million other different video games that they would say would kind of be their Mass Effect series or something like that. So,
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people I talk to, play. I think RPGs are like generally it because there's so many great classic ones like Chrono Trigger or whatever, or Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VI, have this high emotional impact that, and these big long experiences that are very like so different from, I think the distance from like what a video game is versus other types of media is like much farther than like movie versus book or something like that, right? It's like because the interactivity is such a different thing,
right? Yeah.
What kind of games are you playing now? I know you mentioned Switch and PC games, but what are you playing now?
Yeah,
lots and lots of mahjong.
Yeah,
just pinball. I
only play analog games now.
Of course.
So I recently just finished Fire Emblem. I play like most tactics games as like a semi-work related thing.
Gotcha.
I do enjoy the genre, but I really enjoyed the new Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Nice.
I just started up Disco Elysium, which is a RPG detective thing that has like really, really good writing. I'm not that far into it, but it's been getting like really great reviews. So I was like, I gotta check this out.
I've heard nothing but good things about Disco Elysium, and I have it, and I need to start playing it. It's just, I've heard amazing things about it. It sounds like an amazing game.
Yeah, so I'm pumped to invest some hours into it when I have some more time.
When you're not doing world famous podcasts.
Yes, I wish I always am.
Thank you, Adam, for bringing it back to us.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Yeah. Make it about me. And then I have we're on Discord now. I have a group of kind of Discord friends that we play multiplayer stuff. Like I play some Overwatch, or I've been playing for a while. I was like really into the like auto chess style games, like Dota Underlords.
Nice. Cool.
But we also play like Steam released their remote play together thing, which lets you play local multiplayer games through Steam together by like emulating your controller on their computer, which is crazy.
Oh wow!
So we've been playing a bunch of weird, local multiplayer games with friends, which has been fun.
Nice. Sweet. So, is there ever a point where you like, after a long week of work, you don't even want to touch like a video game? Like, have you found yourself almost not like wanting to play more video games, or has your passion for video games kind of stayed the same since you started working for Firaxis?
It's there's definitely days where like I don't want to I just want to like relax and not interact with stuff. I don't think it's really like I'm turned off to video games in general though.
Right.
I think even with, when I play games with friends, it's more of a social experience, and games are just kind of like the background to that. So I still find myself doing that a lot. I do like definitely like my free time is mostly on the weekend, so I don't find myself, being like, this weekend I'm just gonna play video games.
Right.
Because like my life is just like video games all the time. Sometimes.
Right.
Like I make them, and then you like read about them or watch videos about them, and it's just like, okay, I need to, go do yoga or something.
Nice.
When you play video games, especially ones that obviously you did not develop yourself, are you overly critical? Like you said you do it a little bit. Some of the games you play are for work. Is it like competitive research essentially? But do you? Yeah, for example, when I was in the bike industry, every time I would see a bike and see how it was spec'd out or ride a competitor's bike, that's all I would think about.
And he would voice his opinions out loud and say how shitty the other bike was.
Yeah.
What a terrible bike you're riding.
This sucks.
Yeah. I think I'm generally not too critical of. I'm pretty good at just kind of taking in the experience as it is. I definitely, if I'm doing like playing games that are kind of work adjacent, I try to be a little more in tune to like precise criticism or what's going well in their design and what I think could be better. And I generally like have that on a little bit whenever I'm playing games of like what is what's working well about this experience, what's not. But I don't really find myself getting too critical or cynical about games. I still really enjoy games that can take you on whatever journey they want. I think the thing that happens more is with certain systems or mechanics, I can like kind of picture like the compromises that were made to make it work better. Like there's so many like things that you're doing to save time / money when you're making a game that or it's like there's some problems that are like extremely difficult to do, and you kind of pick those up as you make games. Like there's things like it's really hard for if there's never been a game ever where someone's like taken off an item of clothing. Like that's just like impossible to do.
Right.
You think you've seen it, but it was faked.
What?
Yeah, like if having someone like take their shirt off or something in a game is like impossible to do. And having two characters like interact together in like a physically realistic way is pretty tough. So a lot of that kind of gets abstracted, or it's like in a cutscene or something, right? Like where everything's animated.
Right.
Okay.
So kind of on that point, one of the most hyped games of 2019, excuse me, was Anthem. And that was the aftermath of that was kind of the plague of, and this is me, the layperson, not being in the industry at all and not knowing barely knowing what goes into making a video game, but the design choices they made and the issues with the loading screens they had and just how it seemed like a bunch of compromises were made. Do you, when you are kind of seeing a game like that is hyped so much and then for it to kind of come crashing, to me, the outsider, looks like it's come crashing down, do you have those same kind of, not complaints, but well, I'll just say complaints.
Yeah.
Mark, are you still even there?
Yeah. I still have, as a player of games, I still have complaints about how some things work, or if I think a monetization scheme is not player friendly, or that, balance things are too slow, or whatever it is. Like I still have those complaints. I definitely have much more sympathy for the devs on the other side of that, I think, than a standard, player would have. In the case of like Anthem, I didn't play it, so I can't give, very specific notes, but I feel like I read a big article about, it was just kind of like a project mismanagement nightmare. So I really sympathize with the devs, because I think from what I've seen and what I've heard, like there's a lot of love went into it. It just didn't all pan out. Like the flying and stuff felt really good and it looked good, but it just didn't all come together in a way that players wanted.
Right.
And that's really tough as like a developer, where they're probably working a lot of extra time to try to finish this thing, get it out the door. That's like generally the case. If like there's a thing that comes out and it's pretty buggy or has those kind of things wrong with it that seem more obvious, it's probably like even like it's just like a bunch of people put in a bunch of extra time to even get it to that point.
Right. Well, and you could be like Bethesda and call a bug a feature. Oh yeah, taking down Bethesda.
Oh.
Bethesda, I have a lot of friends with Bethesda. You can't. I think stuff like that, where I think Bethesda is funny because they've used, they've obviously improved the engine, but it's like a similar engine as they've used a lot on a lot of their games, and they'll have kind of these legacy bugs that have been around for a while, and but it's like making games is like, especially if you're a producer or involved in production of like managing the team, like there's this huge prioritization you have to do all the time, and those things are probably like, well, players were fine with it back then. We'll get to it if you get to it, and they just never got to it.
Gotcha.
So, so I have some sympathy there. I'm sure there's some engine programmer somewhere that knows how to fix it if he was just given, a week to do so or something like that.
Right.
Do you have any funny anecdotes or anything from
No.
past? No, come on, Mark.
Well, asked and answered. I mean, kind of asked. Mark kind of just cut Adam off.
I was going to ask if you had any funny anecdotes of our prior meetings and interactions in college, but I guess not, Mark. No cherished memories there. I see. No, like just in your day to day, are there things that make you chuckle throughout the day, like little oddities of the video game industry that you don't think that you wouldn't find in other work environments, if you will?
I don't know if every day is like a laugh a minute or anything. I do really enjoy my job, and I think I've only done this mostly, so I can't speak to everyone else's job, but I think what differentiates a lot is, a lot of the people I work with are, I'm actually friends with and are like really interesting, creative people. And, if there's generally not that much workplace conflict, and if there is, it's all very mature, and, of course there's exceptions wherever, but at least in my experience, it's been, a lot of mutual respect with everyone's coworkers. So I find that very nice. It takes that I don't have to worry about people I don't like or whatever at my work, or people I don't think are working hard. Like everyone is super passionate about what they're doing, so
nice.
Makes it a lot easier. And funny stuff that happens. I mean, like there's a lot of you'll get a lot of bugs that are pretty funny. We had one on X2 where it came from we added a destruction effect for most objects in the game, and we just hooked it up, and we had a default one, and was like, well, we don't have time to make a specific one, we'll just hook this up to all of them, and that was attached to tons of objects in the game, but one of those was ladders, and ladders triggered an interact, so that caused the explosion effect. So like you would climb up ladders and it would just detonate. It was like, what is going on?
That's awesome. If I may change the subject a little bit to something maybe a little less fun, and I think Adam maybe wanted to discuss it a little bit too.
I did.
Maybe. I thought you mentioned at the beginning before we started talking to Mark, but maybe you were lying about what you wanted to talk about.
Should I be here? This is getting pretty...
Yeah. See, the thing, when you were talking about your nice work environment, I was like, wow, that sounds nice. Working with Adam is such a chore.
Yeah, I believe it.
But a lot of this past year, we've heard there's been a lot coming out about some aspects of the video game industry, like time crunch and the who is it? The developer does League of Legends.
Riot, yeah.
Riot, thank you. Their issues and allegations at their company about sexual harassment and just a lot of terrible things. How is...
Comment, Mark.
Yes, comment.
Go.
No, I mean, I guess based on your talking about your work environment, that is very different than what we've heard from the other aspects or other corners of the video game industry. How does Firaxis kind of set itself apart, if you can talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think we're slanted a little older and kind of more family focused. I don't want to like put it out like Firaxis still has problems that we're working to solve. I don't think they involve a lot of like sexual harassment stuff or whatever those stories were, but I've crunched to finish out to hit deadlines and stuff, and it's not fun.
Right.
But we try to, what I take away from Firaxis and the people I work with that are, responsible for that kind of thing, which, as I move up, I'm more and more involved in that too, is, making sure we plan better and kind of put milestones at realistic points and are very upfront with what we think it's going to take to hit them so that people don't have to kind of get ground in the dust to hit these milestones, which are just like things that are put in there in the future from some really abstract reasoning, right? It's not like if we don't hit that date, we're gonna lose billions. Like, right. It's not. It's just a date that we thought we would be at about this point in the project at.
Gotcha.
So, my general sense is that, at Firaxis, we're trying to improve our processes. I'm sure a lot of studios are doing this too, so we don't have to crunch. As I've kind of moved into more leadership stuff, like I said, like I'm definitely trying to be cognizant of the design decisions I make, because a lot of times there's a huge kind of downslope of who that affects. Like if in XCOM, if you make an ability, it's like, well, like I'll design what it does, and then someone programs it, then an animator animates a character that does it, and a VFX artist puts effects on it, and then an audio person put sound to that, and right. Maybe like user interface people need to get involved too. Like it's a lot of people for just like one thing, and a lot of those people are like way down the line. Like you can't do audio until you have the animations and effects hooked up, because you need to know what it looks like to figure out what it sounds like.
Right.
Crazy. That's fascinating. Actually,
I'm learning so much. Actually, Adam, you mentioned wanting to talk about something about the video game industry. Was I making this shit up? I could have sworn you said, I want to ask Mark something specifically. Or now that you've heard both mine and his sultry tones, you've lost all control of your body.
Whoa.
I get
it. Nothing immediate that comes to mind. I think my
Adam went like on a whole I got to his house and it was like a 10-minute tirade about something about the video game industry, and I think Adam actually, all right, I think what it was is Adam has his own video game pitch that he was trying to pitch to me. I was like, Adam, I'm not Mark. I'm not Mark. I don't have the even the skill set to even get this started. So maybe in a couple minutes, Adam will remember what his video game was.
I will say, like, Firaxis has the studio itself has a special place in my heart, because one of the first games I ever played was Sid Meier's Gettysburg, and I was like, what, mid to late 90s at best,
something like that.
I don't know. I think that's actually Firaxis's first game.
Cool.
Because some of the I hope that's correct. I do work there. We have all these posters up. Because Firaxis, like in Sid Meier, used to be at a company called Microprose, where like Civilization 1 was like a Microprose game.
We actually sorry, Mark. We actually did a whole episode about the Civilization video game series.
Really?
Yes, we mentioned you. And we mentioned.
I listened to that for sure.
I knew it. You didn't listen.
Gotcha.
I listened to like your first episode. Give me a break.
All right, Mom.
I'm a busy man. I can't even play video games all the time.
But shit.
No, so first of all, is there any chance that Sid will revive that? Because I know that Civil War real-time strategy games are top of mind for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a hot commodity. Everyone's trying to make that.
It's that and Fortnite.
Yeah, neck and neck, I think. You head on over to Twitch right now, you'll see a bunch of Civil War stuff.
Fortnite and Gettysburg.
Yeah. I don't want to give a definitive answer because I can't, but I don't want to sugarcoat this. I seriously doubt it.
Dang it.
All right, Gettysburg 2 confirmed.
This interview's over.
Gettysburging.
Gettysburg 2, Electric Boogaloo.
How about this? An XCOM mod with Civil War era weapons. How about that?
Oh.
Yeah.
There's probably already one. I don't know. There's so many XCOM 2 mods.
Actually, can I talk about that, Mark, for a second? And Adam, if you'll give me permission?
No.
Damn it. All right, well then, Mark, it'll just be you and me talking about it.
Okay.
So, I know that XCOM Enemy Unknown came out before you kind of got to Firaxis and started working on XCOM, but I read somewhere that XCOM Enemy Unknown was harder to mod on PC, whereas XCOM 2 was easier to mod, and as you said, there are tons and tons of mods out there for it. Does the idea of, because for the layperson who may not know, Mark, what are PC game modifications for people who don't know?
Yeah, it's basically community-made content or thing that people will make and change stuff about your game. There's a lot of cosmetic ones, like, people are adding more stuff for their XCOM soldiers to wear. But there's also, like, for X2, we actually hired some modders from XCOM EU to do a big mod as like a showcase for the modability of it. Because
it was the Long War mod group, right? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, and the XCOM EU was really tough to mod. Like, it was tough to work in that. Like, it was my job to do stuff in that engine, and it was kind of tough.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of did an overhaul of a lot of stuff going into 2. Because it's built on it's in Unreal 3. A lot of Fortnite stuff is on Unreal 4.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game engine.
Yes. Yeah.
And then
Epic Games is right down the street.
It's just it's pretty old at this point.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah. Epic Games is based here in Cary, North Carolina.
Yep.
Yeah, we see people on the street corners just flossing, doing the floss dance all the time.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. We're in a cool spot, man.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Kind of wrapping up towards the end of the episode. Usually with our sections, we kind of talk about why you heart whatever the subject is, but with video game design, I guess we've kind of got a good picture of it, but I guess what really keeps you going with video game design and what makes you so passionate enough about it that you want to continue working in the environment you're in?
Sure, I think
I didn't make.
that's a very.
I know my question is so good that it made you speechless.
It's like, oh my. Like I said, it's my favorite kind of artistic medium that I consume art in, and I really, I'm a creative person. Like, I want to be doing creative stuff. Like, we were in a band together.
Yeah.
You know this.
I do know this.
Yeah. Remember?
Wait, hold on.
I always
hold on. Let's play one of our band songs. All right, we'll just leave it blank here to play a Kiss the Devil song. All right, and then we're back.
Yeah. Ooh, what a great tune. That was me yelling, I think. But I always want to kind of get this creative energy out, and it's really satisfying to do it professionally. And the part of making games with a team of other creative people that you're kind of riffing off of and getting inspired by is very satisfying. So to be able to do this for a living is like really a dream come true.
At a grander level, like theoretically in the future, are there things about the current state of video game technology that you would like to see overcome so that you can bring to life some of the artistic ideas that you have stashed away in your head? You don't have to give specifics, but like are there certain concepts or things that you would like to see improved about video game design?
Ooh, that's a pretty broad question.
You could also just answer it as yes.
Oh yeah, of course. No, I think I always like to see just new things. Like I do play a lot of indie games, which are kind of where you get a lot of like the new IPs or like just the singular new thing. I think in the AAA industry, like I'm in, like we work in a lot of IPs and are able to do a lot of creative stuff. But I'm interested to see like what is just like the brand new thing instead of what's the sequel to this franchise that's been around for a long time. That's kind of like weird for me to say. Both of our major franchises have been around for a long time.
Right.
I think we're doing a lot of interesting stuff within them. And I think like as far as game technology goes, I think it's kind of like in game making technology that I'm excited. Like there's been like game engines are like Unity's free. You can make games in Unreal 4 for free. It's like it's never been easier to kind of get in at the ground floor. So, I mean, it does result in like a lot of like there's just a high volume of stuff that's like not quite there yet. But it's also like if anyone, more and more people can make games. You get people with different perspectives, different life experiences, making something that like maybe I would never think to make because I just don't have those experiences. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
What do you think the future of gaming and VR is?
I think VR is really cool. Like I have a VR headset. I think Half-Life Alyx coming out this year.
Oh yeah, here it comes. Half-Life 3, right?
Yeah,
right behind it.
I mean, Valve, I'm sure is going to kill it. So
yeah,
I'm excited about that. With VR, like everyone that I have kind of like showed VR to has like really enjoyed it. I think it's just kind of I think it's getting better. Like there's the Oculus Quest or whatever that doesn't require a computer to use. But it's pretty cost prohibitive, just like PC gaming kind of is. Like it's a very high upfront cost to get into it, even though I think it ends up being cheaper than console gaming because the games are so discounted on digital storefronts. But it's like that's not everyone's going to be able to justify spending. Like my Vive is like $600, $700, $800, something like that. It's really expensive. I was like, I do it for a living. I should probably.
It's a tax write-off for you.
Yeah.
Do you?
There's cheaper ones out there, but I think VR is in a really exciting spot. But I'd be interested to see, what is the audience like? I think there was kind of like a mini VR boom when it all started. Kind of, Oculus was coming up and Vive was coming out, And that's kind of the decisions like a bunch of companies had to make, was like, how many people are going to like own these things that is it worth investing, like making games for? And for some people it has been, and I think a lot of people decided like, well, it's not worth like totally pivoting to make games for it.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Huh. That's
cool.
Awesome.
Is there anything else you want to add, Mark? We really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. It's been a blast.
Yeah, man, it's been fun. I'm happy to educate people about video games and how they're made. I think if there's any like complaints I have about video game fandom besides the obvious trolls and some terrible sexist stuff or whatever,
yeah.
I'm not gonna get into that. But there's a bunch of bad apples too. But is like there's a general kind of lack of understanding of how games are made, I think, in the game fandom audience, and the more and more stuff that people can hear or see of like, oh, like that's why this turned out this way, or why they made that decision, the better.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I know Adam said it, but I totally agree with him. I learned a lot today just by our short conversation, and I'm sorry it won't be longer, Mark. But,
oh man!
But you said specifically in your contract you wouldn't talk for 5 hours, and
I was like, I am just hard. I'm gonna blast noise,
right?
Ruin your ears if we go past too long.
Yeah,
I hope your green room setup was appropriate. We'll talk with your agent afterwards and
all
see,
the blue M&Ms were taken out of your M&M bowl.
I hate those.
Thank you again, Mark.
Sure.
If we can, why don't we hop into recommendations?
Sure.
Adam, do you remember what we recommended to each other last time?
Not a clue.
Me neither.
So you know what, Dan? I was thinking about this. Maybe this is like the car talk shtick where they ask about the weekly puzzler, and Tom always asks Ray, like, "Hey Ray, did you remember the puzzler from last week?" And he goes, "No, I didn't."
And he says, "Yeah, it was this one." Well, I'm Click and you're Clack, and Mark, what would you like to recommend to us today? Whether it be video game, movie, book, something that you've really been jonesing hard on.
Well, I've been trying to get back into exploring a lot of music lately. And I've been really enjoying Poppy's new album, I Disagree, came out early this year, like a week ago, something like that. Poppy is this crazy, she's a pop artist, but also has a lot of like metal and industrial and progressive rock sounds, and her songs kind of do these like big shifts from being like really heavy into being like super catchy, dreamy pop. It's an amazing kind of like sound that like I don't think anyone else has. So if you're into any of those things or not, I would recommend checking out Poppy. It's really interesting, and I think worth the listen.
Awesome, cool. I think I remember you. I think you tweeted about that recently, or put it on Facebook recently.
Oh yeah,
I will definitely check that out because I'm just constantly updating my Facebook and Twitter feed to see what you're saying, Mark.
Yeah, please tell me.
Yeah. Adam, what would you like to recommend?
So I can't actually remember what I recommended last week. Did I recommend watching Lost in Space?
You might have, yeah.
Or did I just text that to you?
You texted me it.
Okay.
Why don't we say this is your, even if it's a two episode recommendation, because I definitely double rec because he loves it so much.
I would recommend watching the Netflix show Lost in Space. There are currently 2 seasons out there. It is entertaining. I won't say that it is the greatest thing since The Sopranos. It's a pretty campy sci-fi series flick, but it entertained me way more than I thought it would.
Gotcha. So, nice.
Daniel or Mark, have either of you seen that series?
I have not.
Right.
I have not either. I did read about it when it was coming out because, of course, it's based loosely on the old Lost in Space series, right. So I'm sure it's exactly like the old campy stuff.
I actually think that what's impressed me so far about it is the kids in the series act really, really well.
Nice.
Like that, I actually think their acting is some of
Like-
the best out of the entire cast.
Like they act like good little kids. Like they're
Yes.
not smoking cigarettes and
Yeah,
not drinking.
they're so well behaved. Love it.
Adam's just like, wow, I want my kids to be like that.
Exactly.
Nice. Adam, I think last time I recommended you watch the HBO series Watchmen.
Yes.
Did you watch any of that?
So I think I said I watched the first episode, and I just haven't gotten the chance to like sit down and watch the rest. I believe you also recommended that I listen to the last podcast on your the funny one. Shit.
Oh,
Comedy
wow.
Bang
Not
Bang.
this one. Oh,
Oh, Mark, dang
Mark.
it.
oh, damn.
We just hear Mark in the background for the next 5 minutes congratulating himself on that joke.
Who's he high-fiving over there? So
Yeah.
many of them.
Yes, Adam, it was. I recommended you listen to the Comedy Bang Bang
Yes.
Best of for 2019.
So I did listen to those.
You did?
And they were highly entertaining.
Did you
So-
listen to the first, it was part 4 of the Comedy Bang Bang?
I started at part 1.
Okay.
And went through I got through part 2. And
Okay.
yeah.
Because part 4 will have the best episodes from 2019.
Okay.
And it is fucking hilarious. There's an amazing bit where Batman is a guest on the podcast. It is so good.
Oh, boy. And what about you, Daniel? What are you recommending for us this week?
Shit, now I need to think of something. Okay, I know what you should listen to, Adam.
Okay.
So there's this great podcast that's much more popular than ours, like most podcasts in the
No
world.
way.
What?
We have billions of listeners,
Yep.
Daniel.
It's
Hard hitting.
Thank you. It is a podcast on the Maximum Fun Network. It is called The Flophouse. It is a bad movie review podcast, just like every bad movie review podcast, but they've been
Okay.
around for 10 years now.
Is it similar along the lines of like how did this get made?
Kind of. They do like a synopsis and then talk about the movie and then decide whether or not it was a good bad movie, a bad movie, or a movie they kind of liked.
Gotcha.
But they just did an episode on Rise of Skywalker,
Oh.
which I think you will find hilarious
Oh,
because
boy.
it will address all of your all the things that made you upset about the movie. So yes, please listen to the Flophouse podcast Rise of Skywalker episode.
I will absolutely do that.
Yes. Mark, that recommendation goes for you too if you want to listen to the Flophouse, but I think you're already gone, so
Yeah, I've checked out long ago.
you fired up your VR headset and you're already
Yeah. I'm in another world, buddy.
you're playing Skyrim VR right now. I see that you're awake. But sincerely, thank you so much, Mark, for talking to us. Is there any way or anywhere that people can reach out to you on social medias if you want to talk about that, or no? Do you not want that out there?
My Twitter is, my public face out there. It's at M Nauta. If people want to follow me or, vent at me about their frustrations in XCOM, I get that sometimes. And I get it.
You'll just
You
completely
missed that shot,
Yeah, it was 75%, Mark. Come on.
Pretty much 100, right? Yeah.
We are your biggest fans other than your parents. So just remember just remember that next time you kiss them goodnight.
Yeah. Picture me right there.
Yeah, so
On that note,
people can reach you at Twitter at mnauta. As I think where
Nice segue. That was so smooth.
this conversation started. Shit. We are, of course, on Twitter at PassionFruitsP2, Instagram at PassionFruitsPodcast, and you can email us at PassionFruitsPodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you, everybody, for stopping by.
Bye.